Daily Detroit is brought to you by the community. Support our work at patreon.com/dailydetroit.
Welcome to your Daily Detroit for Wednesday, August 5th, 2020. I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Jer Stays, and it's the day after the primary election here in Michigan, and we have got a slew of results from local races to run down for you. We'll highlight some of the big headlines and a smattering of local results of interest, including some suggested by our listeners.
A smattering indeed. But first, Dr. Paul Thomas of Plum Health Direct Primary Care joins us to talk the latest in coronavirus and local school districts' plans for the quickly approaching school year.
Dr. Paul Thomas, Plum Health Direct Primary Care, welcome back to Daily Detroit, sir.
Jared, thanks so much for having me on. It's great to be here. And yeah, the circumstances aren't great, but I know we'll get through it.
Yes, we will. It's one of the reasons why we're talking to you. Sven is on the line with me. He just got word that his district for his kids is going online to start the school year. Grosse Pointe schools have decided to go online for the school year. So have a number of districts. Doctor, what changed underlying all of this? Or was it just magical thinking that these schools were going to reopen in person?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think, what changed is that we've had a second wave here in Michigan. Things were looking really good in mid-June, back in, say June 2nd through, let's say June 20th even. We were having fewer than 500 cases a day. And then late June, early July, we started having spikes again of, nearly 1,000 cases a day, near 800 cases a day. And that is problematic. If you're not having the virus under control, you're not seeing a continual decline in the number of cases. That means that people are getting out, not social distancing, connecting with each other. And then the other aspect of this is it is magical thinking in that, if you get children together and expect them not to high five or hug or, share notes or properly social distance themselves, it's going to be really challenging for children, especially those kids who are 5 through 12, let's say. It might be easier for high school students to understand these concepts or older middle schoolers to understand these concepts, but it's magical thinking to think that a 7-year-old's going to be able to maintain social distance throughout the entire school day.
Mm. At the same time, Dr. Paul, there's this persistent belief out there, and, tell us whether or not this is myth or fact, but that young children especially, are less susceptible to coronavirus than adults. And, if that's true, wouldn't that reinforce the case for returning to the classroom?
Sure. I mean, going back to school would be great for those children. However, if those children become infected with the virus, they have parents and they have grandparents who they're going to be coming home to, who are taking care of those children. And those parents and grandparents are susceptible to the coronavirus. And, that's just looking at mortality rate. So yes, if you're an older adult, you have a higher mortality rate relative to children where, very few children have died from coronavirus. Mm-hmm. However, we don't really know the long-term effects of coronavirus. So if you're willing to take a gamble on your children's future health, that getting the coronavirus and recovering from it is going to confer no long-term comorbidities or illnesses or predispositions to other illnesses, then that's a big risk that you're taking.
We've also got teachers and school administrators and people like that to consider in the equation too. I mean, if your teacher goes down and gets infected, obviously you can bring in a sub, but it's not a scenario you want to get into, obviously.
Exactly. And then you have to think about the manpower. In some of these return to school plans, they're talking about wiping down every single desk between every single class. So you're going to tell me you're going to have every single child get out of the school classrooms and go into the hallways and wait for 10 or 20 minutes or however long that process takes and, quote unquote, turn that classroom over for the next batch of students and hope that that's adequate to disinfect. But, let's say you're in an older school district like Hamtramck, where you may not even have a ventilation system capable of air conditioning. So, how are you going to get rid of any potential airborne COVID respiratory droplets between classes? It's just not going to happen. So there are all these factors that you have to consider. And I just don't think that it's a safe environment for children to go back to school. As much as it would be healthy for them socially and educationally, it's just really hard to put those two things into balance, the health of the child versus like the mental and emotional growth.
Well, schools are underfunded even in non-pandemic times. And now you have multiple reports of teachers who are older retiring ahead of schedule, others that just don't want to go to the classroom. So we're shorthanded as it is. And then you put in this virus and there might not be that backup of teachers to draw from in case of an outbreak.
Yeah, exactly. Our schools have been underfunded, and that underfunding has worsened under our current, national federal administration. If only we had a leader in Michigan who was a champion for students and not a champion for privatization of schools. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Well, let's switch from schools to, it is still summertime here. And there was a story today that organizers of the annual kind of boat tie-up in Lake St. Clair are proceeding ahead with plans this weekend on Saturday. Everybody's invited to come tie their boats up and, wade in the waist-deep water and everything. Masks be damned. There's no word about, masks required or anything. Dr. Paul, I saw today in the FREEP that according to the Harvard Global Health Institute, Macomb is one of 3 counties in Michigan, the only one here in southeast Michigan, though, that's been marked as orange, which means the coronavirus risk level is at accelerated speed, so it's a higher risk. Good idea to go out there in the lake and cavort with all the other revelers, you think?
No, not a good idea at all. I mean, you knew what I was going to say, but it's, the question has to be asked because who are these people who think that this is a good idea and really want to flaunt these guidelines? And I think the organizers should be fined, just like if you owned a bar and invited patrons in and packed the place and had no social distancing, no masks, weren't wiping down any tables, you would receive a fine from the state government for acting in an unsafe way, recklessly. And I think these reckless offenders should be fined for engaging in this sort of behavior. I think where we've really gone wrong is our individual liberties. We perceive our individual liberties to be under attack, and people are reacting in ways where they want to flaunt these rules or throw parties like this to flaunt these rules. And it's really damaging our entire ecosystem, our entire health of our communities. And it's at these sort of events that the virus spreads rapidly among people and goes back to their home communities and can affect the older population and cause further death and further comorbidities.
Sven, I wanted to stop for a second. And wasn't it Macomb County that went ahead and pulled their emergency declaration around the virus ahead of other counties? And now it's the one that we're seeing accelerated spread in.
I believe you are correct.
So there you go. And then we've got so many reports through our inbox and chat around workplaces that are not going to be coming back until at least the start of 2021. If not later. You've got the Canadian border, as we reported earlier on a previous show, that will not be open for a significant amount of time. Is this just the spiral we're in, Doc?
Yeah, I think we have struggled to take this virus seriously as a population, and you're seeing repercussions across our economy and across our businesses, and you're seeing it in the schools, and you're seeing it in international travel. Like, who wouldn't love to, travel across the globe this year and have a fun vacation with your family? But you just can't do that right now because
nobody will let us in.
Yeah, reckless and irresponsible, and the whole world is watching us behave this way, and they're saying that they don't want us to bring the virus into their countries. Places like New Zealand, all right, they only have 5 million people, but they've closed their borders and they've more or less resumed to normal life. They're having rugby matches with attendees and all this sort of thing. And we haven't learned the simple lesson about, staying at home, wearing masks, and learning from the experiences of other countries. We just haven't learned those lessons.
We have a friend of the show in New Zealand, and I am always jealous of his social media status updates because his world has basically returned to normal. And I've wondered if we could do something where we shut down individual states, do it on a state-by-state basis, and really just lock everything down, nationally lock down, but keep travel low. Doc, what do we need to do to really get our arms around this crisis?
Especially for those of us parents who are very much, invested in our children at some point being able to safely return back to the classroom for everybody's sake, everybody's sake and sanity and well-being.
Sure. I think some problems are bigger than individuals and families and communities. And this is why we need a strong federal response, a coordinated federal response that distributes personal protective items to households, families, businesses, and coordinates with local and state governments to have a planned response to a coronavirus circumstance. And we just haven't seen that from our federal government. It's kind of like the Trump administration is wishing this away and saying it's not so bad or it's already under control, when clearly it's not. We're having hotspots like Macomb County where this is growing unchecked and unfettered. And, it's really difficult for individuals to be placed in this situation where they're deciding, do I stay at home with my child so they can receive a quality education with me, or do I go to work and earn a living? And those are really difficult choices that families should not be having to make. And, for the individuals who are doing their best, the best that you can do is wear a mask, avoid large gatherings, wash your hands well, make only necessary trips, avoid unnecessary travel. And that's what you can do as an individual. But I think the most important thing to do is to vote and vote for some changes here so we can get some coordinated federal responses to issues like this in the future.
Doc, do you think we're going to have to do another lockdown?
I don't know, because our rates of new infections per day are not what they were when we had to go into the lockdown. So, we're not seeing 1,500 cases like we were in, let's say, late March, early April. But we are seeing substantial cases. I could see a place where if children do go back to school and we have a concomitant, influenza outbreak in September or October, you could see cases skyrocket again and we might be heading for another lockdown. But I think that's the importance of planning this out and coming up with a coordinated response on a statewide basis for schools so that we don't have another outbreak that continues the spread of this virus.
Well, Dr. Paul, thanks as always. We really appreciate your thoughts and your expertise on this one.
Thanks for having me. It's great to talk about it. And to everybody who's struggling through this, keep at it, and there are better days ahead.
All right, it's time to jump into these local races from across the region. In what some thought would be a close race, incumbent Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib trounced Detroit City Council President Brenda Jones by a 2-1 margin in Michigan's 13th district. This is for the Democratic primary. As someone who lives in the district, the campaigning was marked by two different styles. Tlaib sent bright, cheery mailers about what she's done and plans to do. Jones, a coronavirus survivor, sent some sort of thank you note saying that we're going to get through this. Also, there was a shadow political action group that sent some almost Trumpian mailers focusing on defunding the police and alleging that Tlaib is all about her popularity and profile and not the district. The pro-Jones PAC also played the race, with one having a slew of members of Congress, including the late John Lewis, offering quotes about why it's important to have a black congressperson, though none of the quotes were directly about Jones. This keeps a vocal Trump opponent and member of the squad in Congress in an overwhelmingly Democratic district.
Another race of interest is Michigan's 10th congressional district, which stretches from the Thumb to northern Macomb County, and where incumbent Representative Paul Mitchell is stepping down. Lisa McClain, a pro-Trump conservative who serves as an executive with the Hantz Group, came out tops in a 3-person field. She'll face Kimberly Bison, who won the Democratic primary. The district is considered solidly Republican. And then out on the west side of the state, Peter Meyer, a member of the family behind the retail giant of the same name, outdistanced 4 Republican candidates in the race to replace independent Representative Justin Amash. Amash, of course, is the former Republican Tea Party candidate who left the GOP after becoming an outspoken critic of President Trump. Meyer will face Democratic immigration attorney Hillary Scholten in November.
Now, this next race, Sven, I am very interested in.
Yeah, it was one of the more closely watched contests, that being the race for who will take over the former seat of longtime Oakland County Executive L. Brooks Patterson, a Republican who passed away last year. Democrats who narrowly control the County Board of Commissioners appointed former Ferndale Mayor David Coulter to fill the remainder of Patterson's term. With nearly all precincts reporting, Coulter had won nearly 54% of the vote against Andy Meisner. He's the incumbent county treasurer who had opted to seek the county executive position instead of pursuing re-election. On the Republican side, meanwhile, Mike Kowal, a former state lawmaker from White Lake Township, was cruising to a win with nearly 75% of the vote over attorney Jeffrey Nutt. Coulter then will face off against Kowal in November. Jer, this is kind of a seismic shift in Oakland County. Coulter, by virtue of his appointment, is the first Democratic county executive in Oakland County history. The county, of course, has been trending more and more Democratic over time. It voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. That continues a run of casting its ballot for the Democratic candidate in presidential elections, going back, I believe, to George H.W. Bush, if I'm not mistaken, that era, or I think they at least voted for Clinton.
To me, Sven, this is interesting because you've got 2 candidates now in this general election that represent 2 very different visions of Oakland County. You think about a Republican from White Lake. How many times have we talked about folks from White Lake who just do not want to be part of anything regional? And then you've got all the dynamics of Northern Oakland County, which are very different than the dynamics of Southern Oakland County. Coulter, the former Ferndale mayor. I feel like this is a clash of 2 visions.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Coulter definitely bringing kind of the progressive Ferndale politics with him. I mean, I think he's pretty mindful that Oakland County's pretty closely divided, between Republican and Democrat. I don't, he's definitely outspoken in his support for mass transit and trying to push that forward and finally break some break through here in the Detroit area. But, he's been touting some of the work he's done to kind of broaden healthcare and mental health offerings through the county's health clinics, as well as, the work he's been doing to try to help small businesses deal with the COVID-19 pandemic and the shutdown and everything. I mean, I know he's really focused on the importance of getting the virus under check here in Oakland County and so that the economy can get back on track.
There's big news in the Oakland County prosecutor race where former assistant prosecutor and Democrat Karen McDonald soundly beat incumbent Jessica Cooper by a nearly 2-to-1 margin. Criminal justice reform was a big issue in this race, including sentencing for marijuana offenses now that weed is legal in Michigan. McDonald will face Republican attorney Lynn Getz in November. This was, I think, a surprise, Sven.
Definitely a surprise. McDonald was a former assistant prosecutor in the prosecutor's office preceding Cooper's time in office. I think a lot of people consider Cooper to be a little bit overly strict, a little too heavy in the law and order at a time when, we're seeing, Black Lives Matter protests all across the country and here in Detroit and everything. And so I think McDonald kind of capitalizing on some of that sentiment. And meanwhile, in the Democratic primary for Oakland County Sheriff, former state senator and retired Wayne County Sheriff's Detective Vincent Gregory of Southfield came out atop a 3-way field. He'll face incumbent Sheriff Mike Bouchard on November 3rd.
Over in Macomb County, Mary Krzyzanowski came out on top of a field of 5 Democratic candidates, including 4 women, vying to replace the former prosecutor Eric Smith, who stepped down recently after being charged in a corruption scandal. Krzyzanowski is a former Macomb County Circuit Judge who earned the nickname Scary Mary for her reputation of issuing tough sentences.
And on the Republican side for the prosecutor's race in Macomb County, State Senator Peter Lucido easily defeated Richard John Goodman, a 30-year veteran of the prosecutor's office. Lucido got more than 68% of the vote despite fighting off numerous accusations of sexual harassment earlier this year up in the state capitol. He was actually stripped of one of his committee chairmanship assignments as a result of an investigation by his own political party. So, you've got a law and order former circuit court judge against Peter Lucido. This is going to be really interesting. In a county where they're replacing a longtime prosecutor, I think, who was first elected in 2004, who went down in a corruption scandal. So, wow, I guess the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office is going to be something to watch, huh?
So we're going to stick with prosecutors this time to Wayne County. Although progressives fared well with Rashida Tlaib, they did not in the Wayne County prosecutor's race. Kim Worthy, as of this recording, is pulling more than 60% of the vote, with most of the precincts in against her challenger, Victoria Burton Harris. Worthy had come under fire for some recent cases handled by her office, but a good reputation among the public around getting rape kits tested and how she has handled police brutality seems to have carried her through. However, no matter who is in charge, the office is chronically underfunded, and voters from my conversations on the street were skeptical that a 33-year-old defense attorney could handle the numerous challenges. Of note, Worthy had the endorsement of Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
And then switching to the Wayne County Treasurer's race, the primary. This one we've been watching. It's too early to call it as we record this, though. Wayne County Treasurer Eric Sabri has a very strong challenge from Beverly Kindle Walker. Sabri has been involved in some interesting situations involving family members and foreclosed properties. Nothing illegal, but the media have raised a number of questions. Also, foreclosures have rocked many Detroit and Wayne County residents. They've raised a lot of questions about who exactly the government is working for.
And of note, there was a recent court decision where it was ruled that Wayne County cannot make a profit off of these foreclosures, and this all happened under Sabri. Moving on, State House race, District number 9, the Democratic primary. This is one where the Democrats are basically guaranteed to win. Trump-supporting Democrat Karen Whitsitt has fended off a primary challenge there. This district covers Detroit and a sliver of Dearborn. She gained national fame for praising Donald Trump for using hydroxychloroquine to treat COVID-19. Whitsitt is a coronavirus survivor herself and credits hydroxychloroquine for her recovery. I'd note here, since then, most studies have shown it to have no effect, and the FDA has pulled its provisional support of using the drug. The Michigan Democratic Party has pulled all support and funding for Whitsitt, but now they're in a tough spot as well. She's won the primary and handily.
And Jer, we've got some listener requests for some local races that they wanted us to cover for them as well, right?
Absolutely. These are a couple of state house races where no one got a majority of votes, but there are still winners. These are districts without strong Republican challengers so that they are sure to stay in Democratic hands. So these winners are basically going to be the people who get into office. First off, former gubernatorial candidate Sri Tanadar has won his primary in the 3rd Michigan House District. That's up in the University District, Sven, back where we used to be based.
Our old stomping ground.
With about 35% of the vote. His two closest challengers were Donovan McKinney and China Cochran. Cochran got known throughout the area for her bright pink lawn signs. It was something new, which I just kind of visually appreciate. It's kind of like a pink flamingo.
I've seen some of those, yep.
Tanadar carried the city of Detroit when he ran for governor, has name recognition, and although he has made a number of media missteps, he seems no worse for wear in his local district. He is a wealthy businessman who recently moved from Ann Arbor to Detroit to run for this seat. So let this be another lesson I want to share with folks, and it's just key. Detroit really has no problem electing new residents if they know them, whether it was Shree or Mike Duggan or a number of folks over the years. And after 20 years in this town, I can tell you that the carpetbagger charge rarely actually matters here if folks know your name.
And we move to a district near and dear to the North End headquarters of Daily Detroit. That's State House District 4. It serves Central Detroit and Hamtramck. Abraham Ayash, a candidate endorsed by Bernie Sanders, handily won that race with 35% of the vote in a wide field of challengers. His challenger was Michelle Oberholzer, who's been on this show a couple of times for various reasons and works with people to stave off foreclosures. She came in a distant second. She could also be described as a progressive, which is an interesting shift for that part of town. Jarrett, one has to wonder if the underlying politics of the area are changing, especially in Hamtramck, where, as you've talked about this with Hamtramck City Clerk August Gitschlag, you're seeing a huge influx of new residents.
For sure you are. You're seeing young residents, mostly without kids, moving into Hamtramck, and it's
and the North End, I would add.
Oh yeah, my neighborhood is definitely starting to change without a doubt. Sticking nearby in this, we're talking about the Hamtramck Schools bond. The reason we're going to talk about this niche race is that we had the superintendent of the district here on the show. This bond was to raise money to get kids out of portable classrooms and fix some old historic schools. It is going down to defeat by a 2-1 margin. That will mean that in the entire history of the district, Hamtramck has never been able to raise funds beyond the state minimum to fund their schools. I would note here that most successful school districts in Michigan utilize both forms of public funding available. That's the per student allowance from the state and a separate local millage for buildings and repairs. This really is going to tie Hamtramck schools' hands. And in an era of schools of choice, it's probably not a good sign for the district.
No, definitely not. All right, and then a couple just kind of random races that caught our eye and we thought worthy of inclusion. Clarence Das, an attorney and former Oakland County Assistant Prosecutor. He's been a guest on this show. He narrowly lost to Lori Saven in a three-way race for 6th Circuit Court judge in Oakland County. Also, voters in tiny Royal Oak Township, that is sandwiched in between Ferndale and Oak Park along the 8 Mile Road corridor. They soundly rejected a ballot proposal to allow recreational marijuana businesses in that township.
All right, friends, thank you so much for listening to this epic show today. A reminder that this all local coverage is only possible thanks to our members on Patreon at patreon.com/dailydetroit.
You can join them and help us push Detroit's conversation forward at patreon.com/dailydetroit. We've also got a big bright orange button on our homepage at dailydetroit.com. And as always, thank you for your support.
With that, I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Sven Gustafson. Take care of each other, and we'll see you with a mask on.